Hello again. This time we're going to be talking about a few of the key concepts in Spinoza's ethics. That very difficult work that you've been wrestling with this week. Spinoza was born in 1632 to a Portuguese Jewish family in Amsterdam. His father ran an importing business. He was raised with a traditional Jewish education, groomed perhaps for becoming a rabbi. However, he did not complete his studies, but at the age of 17, left school in order to aid with the family's importing business. He did not cease studying, however, and he continued to study privately with a number of important scholars, including some very important free thinkers who maybe influenced him in his own very radical views. When his father died at the age of 21, his inheritance was disputed by his sister, upon which he took her to court, won the case, and then renounced entirely his claim in her favor, giving it all to her. Indeed, throughout his life, he refused to accept honors or positions, and for most of his life, he relied either on sponsorship of others or eking out a fairly meager living grinding lenses. At the age of 23, Spinoza was excommunicated. He was banished from the Jewish community of Amsterdam. And once you've begun reading his radical thoughts in ethics, that should come perhaps as no surprise to you. Spinoza lived only to the age of 44, dying in 1677 of a lung disease, probably brought on by his grinding of lenses and the glass powder that he was constantly inhaling. Well, let's turn to the ethics now. Now, if anything, Spinoza is even more optimistic about the possibilities for human knowledge and the things that we can understand as a result of our rational insight into the nature of things, even more optimistic than Descartes. And you'll see this modeled in a way in his book, The Ethics, because the Ethics is modeled after Euclid's Elements, the classical textbook of geometry of ancient Greece. He begins with definitions, axioms, propositions, and then proofs for various theorems. So he intends that knowledge is something that can be carried out in a mathematical form following this. It's one of the things that makes perhaps a little bit of difficulty in reading, apart from the sheer technicality of much of his vocabulary and his argumentation. It's one of the things that makes reading this a little bit difficult. However, it gives you a clear indication of what he thinks is possible, what he thinks the human mind can accomplish. To begin with, let's take a look at a couple of Spinoza's initial definitions. Among those is this: a thing is said to be finite in its own kind when it can be limited by another thing of the same nature. For example, a body is said to be finite because we can always conceive of another body greater than it. So too a thought is limited by another thought. But body is not limited by thought, and thought is not limited by body. They're of different kinds. But a body is limited by another body. A body is something bound and finite. We can think of another body larger than it. One body can't occupy the same space as another body. If we're thinking about one thing, an opposed thought of something different can chase that thought out of our minds and replace it with something else. This is a limitation. Marks it as finite. Look now at Spinoza's definition of substance. A substance, he says, is that which is in itself and is conceived through itself. That is, that the conception of which does not require the conception of another thing from which it has to be formed. Substance for Spinoza is in itself and is conceived through itself. This is a word we've seen before. We see Descartes using the term substance and Estelle using the term substance, although neither of them gave an actual definition to it. Now this is a word that goes back in philosophy to Aristotle. Aristotle really first introduces the notion of a substance to indicate a thing, the reality of an existing thing is what we call a substance. Now there are a couple of characteristics to substance which, in the way that Aristotle uses it, which are reflected in Spinoza's definition. Substance is something numerically one, says Aristotle, and it's separable, and it is independent. Okay, so it's separable from other things. It's independent, that it kind of exists in and of itself, and it's numerically one. It's just one thing. So for Aristotle, a substance was just about anything at all that you would ordinarily call a thing or an object. Whether it's a living thing or an inanimate, some other sort of thing. All of those things were substances. So this individual human being, this individual horse, this individual dog, all of those would be counted as substances in Aristotle's view. Indeed, just about anything that you could call this of any sort is a substance for Aristotle. And Aristotle also distinguishes substances from attributes. Substances have attributes. So if we're looking at Fido, this particular dog, a substance, well, Fido has short or long hair, has a cold nose, warm heart, has a certain color, many other characteristics that we could attribute to Fido. And Aristotle used this particular concept too as a device for giving an explanation of unity through change. These various characteristics that Fido has can change through time, but Fido nevertheless remains the same individual. There's something essential about Fido that remains and stays the same. So notice that this is, if we look back at Spinoza's definition again, Spinoza says that a substance is that which is in itself and is conceived through itself, the conception of which does not require the conception of another thing from which it has to be formed. Right? So we see that Spinoza's definition reflects, in a way, Aristotle's notion that a substance is something that is numerically one, separable, and individual. Now if we go back to our friend Fido, this particular individual dog, this Aristotelian example of a substance, notice that we could ask, well, is Fido really one? Is Fido really numerically one? Fido has 4 legs, a tail, 2 floppy ears, many hairs, many of which, are always falling out on top of it. Okay. So what makes Fido indeed numerically one? Is Fido really separable? Okay, well, Fido can be on the sofa or on the floor, walk outside, go different places, so that there's a sense in which Fido is separable from the other things around Fido. But Fido is also breathing in air and exhaling. Fido is eating dog biscuits, digesting them, and then passing them. So is Fido truly separable? Is Fido really independent? Well, Fido's born, lives, and dies, but Fido is caused by something, and Fido is dependent for living on other things. So is Fido ultimately truly independent from other things? Spinoza takes these characteristics, these qualifications for something to count as a substance very, very seriously, perhaps more strictly and more radically than Aristotle does. And so we'll see that understanding that's an important element in understanding Spinoza's subsequent argument that there can really be one and only one substance in the universe. That substance, namely, is God, or, in other words, nature.